that the museum has. And Jackie Andrew is also going to do a short little program on napkin rings that Jim Andrew has, and because he had quite a collection of them, and we're going to put them on the table, and she's going to talk a little bit about that. On August 2nd, we're having Thomas Lane, the county attorney, here, and he is going to talk about the history of eminent domain. It's a coffee and conversation program, so it's at 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning on August 2nd. And he won't talk for a long time. I've told him 20 minutes to half an hour at the most. So he'll talk for a little bit, and then we'll have plenty of time to talk if we want to sit around the table and drink coffee and have it, and just chat. We can do that. We had one of those in January with the Questers, and it was really enjoyable. And so we're following up with another one. So those are all my announcements. So again, please be patient with me. And here is Jed.
I'm sorry for the delay, folks. Thank you all for coming. Partly my fault. We should have had a trial run last week to get all the technology working, but we didn't. And, hopefully it will work today. This is the first slide that I created. And before I get into that, I want to tell you why I picked this topic. It's Lincoln and Iowa. Lincoln didn't have a lot of contact with Iowa. In fact, he was only in the state that I know of 3 times. But he had some significant connections otherwise. And that's what we'll be talking about today.
Jed, before you start, I just want to make sure the microphone is turned on.
Oh, I thought Margaret turned it on.
Oh, I thought I did. Yeah, it's on. Okay, you just hold it up to your mouth.
This better?
Right, yeah, right there. Jed, say it one more time. Let me check this speaker right here. Go, check, one more time.
One more time?
That's good.
Okay, all right. All you with hearing problems like I have, move to the front. Anyway, every year Margaret asks me to do a program on Lincoln, so I try to find different topics and subjects. So this year is Lincoln's connection to the state of Iowa. There weren't a lot. He only was in the state that I can find out about 3 times. But he had some significant connections for other reasons. Part of the reason is that we're talking about 1830s, and when this starts, and especially the Black Hawk War in 1832. At that time, they didn't have railroads very far. They didn't have a bridge across the Mississippi River. You had to go by ferry. Davenport, Iowa, which is across the street, and we're going to talk about it in a little bit, only had about 250 people. So there's not much reason in 1932 to go across the river or go to Iowa, because it was, at that time, an unorganized territory. So that's, and besides that, Springfield, Illinois, and New Salem, where he lived, was quite a ways from the river. Anyway, Iowa was a frontier land. It didn't become a state until 1847. So what we're going to talk about is...
Can't hear you.
Can't hear me?
It just went off.
Well, you got too far away from the mic.
All right, I'll try to stay close. I'll try to stay close. Anyway, the slide that you see now is Abraham Lincoln and the Black Hawk War. That's his first sort of connection with the state of Iowa. And I'll give you the connection, the real connection in a little bit. But in 1804, the U.S. government signed a treaty with Chief Black Hawk, the Sauk Indian tribe, to move across the Mississippi River and stay on the west side of the river. They had lived on the east side, and that was from 1804. In 1830, he decided he didn't like that anymore. He wanted back to his native land. So there were 1,000 people across the river, including 500 warriors, and that started the Black Hawk War. Abraham Lincoln's connection was he was a young man. He was only 23 at that time, and he was living in New Salem, Illinois. They called for volunteers for volunteer militia. And in 1830, because of this action, the U.S. government had passed a law called the Indian Removal Act to take care of this problem. They called for volunteers. Lincoln was one of those volunteers. formed a company of militias. He was only 23, but the men liked him, and he was so well thought of that they elected him captain at age 23. Knew nothing about war, nothing about weapons, nothing about Indians, but he was elected captain. One of the funny stories about that is when he came to a fence or a wall, he didn't know the command to get him over the fence, so he said, fall out, reform on the other side of the fence. The next photo should be a photo of Indian chief.
The photo is on my screen, but it's not on yours, so let's see if I can go.
1832 Black Hawk.
Yeah, and it's on my screen, but it's not on yours.
Patience, folks. Sorry.
I can't.
Margaret, Joe will help you.
I only have to come up and help me.
The label should say 1832 Black Hawk.
No, it's on my screen. It's on my computer screen, it's just not up here. Yes, I'll see what you open with mine. There.
If you can zoom in.
I did. I just read it. I've been talking to
I think, Jed, you cannot ask him to zoom in. I think he cannot, we cannot expect volunteer help to do too much. Yeah, why not?
I'll keep talking. I'll keep working until we're going to have another slide in a minute. As I said, Lincoln was elected captain of the volunteers for a 3 or 4 month stint, which he served. They never did engage in battle. They never did find Black Hawk. He did say that when people asked him about that service, he said, well, I had a few bloody engagements with mosquitoes. And nothing I can recall as far as injuries, but I've been to Muscat once. He did come across, as the Indians had attacked some settlers, and they found mutilated bodies, dead bodies, also dead Indians. People had been scalped and so on. That was as close as he came to any war action in the Black Hawk War. The next slide, if you can do the next one, is called Young Lincoln Statue. Or should say 1832 captain.
Okay.
yeah, it's Algonquin. They're coming down the line between Eastern and Western.
When you go to the next one, it says 1832 muskets. And I found online some information about that service in the Black Hawk War. One of them was a receipt that he signed at that time for 30 muskets. And one of the Abraham Lincoln sites has the original of that receipt, and he received the 30 muskets.
Jed, who are the two adversaries in that war? United States and Black Hawk Indians?
Well, technically, yes, it was the United States Army. Lincoln was a volunteer in the Illinois militia. When his 3 months was over, He was discharged, got discharged, but he re-volunteered again and came back as a private, appointed by a military officer from the U.S. Army. But he had a receipt for those muskets. Did you find that one?
The 18 muscles.
Any event, his service involved burying some of the victims of those scalpings. But what this is all leading up to is the next slide, called 1850 September.
Okay.
And this is a copy of a bill from the 31st Congress in 1850. That bill in 1850, in September, number 50, 1850, was a Missouri Compromise, which you're familiar with. That was a bill that put a dividing line along the Missouri border and decided on free states and slave states. But as part of that bill, if you can scroll down, and you may not be able to read that language, but the language is this. And this is what I'm leading up to from the Black Hawk War. I'll read it from my screen if I can. Those non-commissioned officers, musicians, or privates, whether regulars, volunteers, rangers, or militia, who performed military service in any regiment in the service of the United States in the war with Great Britain, or Indian Wars, War of 1812, Mexican War, are entitled to bounty on public lands. And each person was entitled to receive 160 acres if you served a certain amount of time. Lincoln was entitled to receive 160 acres. This was in 1850. It was 18 years after the Black Hawk War when they passed the statute. So you could pick some land. Interestingly enough, Lincoln didn't pick any land in Illinois. He picked land in Iowa, the Iowa Territory. He picked 2 parcels of land. This is his first real Iowa connection. 40 acres in Tama County and 120 acres in Crawford County. So he got a certificate in about 1852, a certificate of bounty for those 2 pieces of land, and had to register them in Iowa. By that time, Iowa was a state. He could have picked land anywhere, but he picked those rather than Illinois. He never saw the land, and he didn't register them until 1852. The land in Tama County is 5 miles north of Toledo, and the land in Crawford County is about 7 miles north of Denison, Iowa. Again, he never saw those pieces of land, and they weren't sold until his son Robert, after Lincoln was assassinated at some point in the 1870s, Robert Lincoln sold the piece of land in Tama County, and then in about 1890, he sold the Crawford County piece of land. Robert Lincoln did. And I should have a slide, the next slide should be.
Why would he choose 2 pieces of land instead of 1? What was the reasoning? That's unusual. He chose a 40 and 120 not together.
Well, because you didn't get 160 unless you served a certain length of time. So he served twice. So he got 120 for his first service and apparently 40 for the second, as I understand. We should have a slide coming up showing monuments. Well, next one should say Old Indian Wars. There we go. That talks about the bounty lands.
Old Indian ones.
Go to the next one.
That's that deal over there out there by, where Sitters lives. That's from the Civil War.
The next slide should be a plaque that's in Crawford County, north of Denison. It was installed in 1923 by the chapter of the DAR. It says the plaque is on a rock on that farm. It says land grant Major Abraham Lincoln for services rendered in the Black Hawk War, 1832. Again, installed in 1923. And there should be a slide coming up showing also